So today I'm here with Dr. Todd Watts, the doctor's doctors, as some said, the parasite guy, the biochem guy, the guy that basically aced his boards in biochemistry, never knew that it was going to be so important as he became the doctor teaching doctors about labs and what they meant, formulating supplements that have revolutionized chronic illness. So thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Jaban. We had a lot of fun in school together, didn't we?
We did.
A
We
lot
had
of studying.
a lot of studying. And as he was teaching everybody how to do biochemistry, which is what we want to talk about today, one of the topics I want to approach is chemical toxicities like atrazine, which you presented on. We could talk about even uranium, parasites, so many of these things that you've done presentations on and created solutions for, and they're still not well known enough. So as we're diving in, let's start off with atrazine. What is it?
So atrazine is a chemical used to spray on foods. So it's typically used to spray on corn and sugarcane and a variety of other foods, macadamia nuts, pineapple. So anything with basically high fructose corn syrup, corn, anything derivatives of that are going to be concentrated with atrazine. It's also in our water, our water supply. So the municipality water contains atrazine in it. And it's a chemical that's used second most used chemical behind glyphosate, which I'm sure you've talked about with others before. And but it's one that most people don't know about.
And what exactly are they trying to do with atrazine?
So it's an herbicide, pesticide, but what it does to the human body is it really massively messes up the hormone system. So in men, it feminizes men. In the studies they did with frogs, it turned male frogs into female frogs, even being able to reproduce. And it causes a lot of problems with obesity, neurological brain issues. But the central part of what we see a lot of is going to be disruption in hormone. And in females, it does defeminize females, and it actually has a really high affinity towards the thyroid.
Okay. So this chemical, which by the way, I'm a Kansas City native and I've looked at the water supplies around our area. It actually is listed as one of the chemicals that's in our water supply. They're not purposely putting that there, but we have so much of a farming community that runoff is getting into our water supply and it's not being completely removed. So it always makes me think when we're talking about these chemicals that get into our water supplies, we're talking about it feminizing men and creating hormone problems for women. And then with the clients that I'm getting in, the amount of estrogen dominance and PCOS and the amount of testosterone issues that we're running into. I know there's stats out there that say testosterone levels since 1960 have dropped by almost 50%. Is this chemical part of that puzzle?
It is, and especially in childhood, boys, you see that they have about 50% less testosterone than their classmates that may be thin. And so the obese ones probably have much higher propensity or storage of atrazine in their body. And then there's a whole list of other things that can come with it, dealing with depression, anxiety, and it's what society is facing today. It's a hormone epidemic, a fertility problem. Anxiety and depression is everywhere. And, we're talking about the body. The most important thing when we're looking at the body in disease and illness that we're seeming to have a lot of problems with is the terrain theory, not the germ theory. And atrazine is one of those big chemicals, with glyphosate and other, plastics and things that change the terrain in our body, that express and change hormones, they change enzymatic reactions and cause, illness and lots of diseases.
So if you're sitting here listening to this information, you're going, well, I've got low testosterone. Well, what is low testosterone? Low testosterone in labs, if you're looking at your general Western medical labs, are going to be usually around 250 or below is what their standards are.
I'd say 500 and below is what it really should be, because the standard before, decades ago when I was growing up was more 800 to 1300 was normal.
Oh, wow. So I know I've ran my testosterone and I was at an 800 to 900 level. naturally, nothing brought in.
Amazing.
And I do a lot of work to keep it there. I eat organic food and drink distilled water and red light, do all these other things to get my testosterone level. You're saying, well, let's just call it out. 50 years ago,
Yeah.
800 to 1300 was normal.
It's probably normal. And that's where even they say today it's optimal. So what's optimal? Well, we know it's optimal in those ranges. And if it's below those ranges, what happens? You below 500, you start to get depressed, you lack motivation, you have an inability to build the muscle the way you want to, you get obese. And you look at the pictures that they show of the 1970s of what people look like at the beach to what today it is. And it's these chemicals that are causing the disruption in a lot of the obesity and a lot of the problems that people have today.
So you brought up terrain theory versus germ theory. What is that?
So the germ theory is where we believe bugs are infectious. So you catch a bacteria, catch a virus, and that was based off of Louis Pasteur, and that really has been disproven in lots of studies where Beauchamp, at the same time period, came out with the terrain theory, meaning that the bug's there to metabolize a toxin. It's the terrain that shifts or pleomorphs the bug, and whether it's bacteria, or it's viruses, exosomes, and it causes them to change their form and then are metabolized the toxin, but at the same time causing damage to our body. Fungus, candida is another one. So fungus and candida, the same thing. It's there for a reason. It's not just you caught it and you have it now. It's there because of the terrain is not what it needs to be. It's not a healthy terrain. So it's absorbing the toxins, it's absorbing whatever it may be. And that can be shifted due to radioactive elements like uranium, radium, thorium. It can be shifted due to all these herbicides, pesticides, industrial environmental chemicals that are in our foods, water, and air. And then it could also be shifted from the stress we may be under, whether it's mental stress just from working so much or just the environment we're in, the people we're around, emotional stress. Those things can actually shift our physiology. That phrase, "you are what you think," makes a difference. And so it does change your microbiome. It does shift your terrain. And so everything about health to me is a healthy microbiome is a healthy you. We coined that phrase, trademarked it at Cellcore, and it's so true. It goes right back to the terrain theory of a healthy microbiome is a healthy you. A healthy terrain is going to create a healthy microbiome, which will create a healthy you, which is why we created the products and the approach that we did.
So I want to define a couple of the words you said, because pleomorph is not a word that most people hear.
True.
And you said that it was where you have bugs in your body, which we all have, by the way. Your microbiome or bugs. So if you've ever taken a probiotic, you're trying to feed bacteria that are native to your body. They're good for you. Without them, we die. There's more than 40,000 different bacteria that we've actually named. When the last I looked in our digestive tract, 40,000 different specific bacteria. So there's a lot, and that's just the ones that are named that we know about in the gut itself. So that you add on top of that viruses, fungus, parasites. These organisms are in our body. They're natural to our body. They are in harmony with our body. Without them, we do not function. We can't digest food properly. We can't make energy properly. We don't make neurotransmitters, which help us to make our happy hormones like serotonin properly. So we need them. But when we have things like atrazine, stress, when we have other chemicals or toxins that come into our body, they create a environment that then is no longer good or healthy for those organisms. And then they can become pathogenic. Is that correct?
Exactly. They can shift the form that they're in. Also, you'll see that some of them will take more of that, say, population. If they're balanced, it can create an imbalance in that population of bacteria, which then can also put off toxins that then are pathogenic or that create disease or damage to the cells, to the tissues. And so, though, our society today in medicine, they think, take an antibiotic. And if you take the antibiotic, it'll kill the body. But why is the bacteria there in the first place? Well, it's there in the first place due to something else that caused it to shift or change within the body. So in the studies and research on H. pylori, think, oh, H. pylori is really bad. It causes ulcers. No, but it's also a beneficial bacteria or commensal bacteria. So what form of that bacteria is it in? And as we see that it really goes back to the environment that's created in there. So when I have somebody that's dealing with those kind of issues on being sure they're taking binders and clearing out the toxins in their gut and stomach, that's maybe creating the bacterial shift to cause the ulcer.
So it's about asking, why is this situation happening?
Yeah.
Not about just simply trying to put out the symptoms, which another analogy of this is if you have a house burning, the smoke coming off of the house, that's the symptoms. So you can take a giant fan and blow the smoke away, but that doesn't stop the fire that's raging inside the house that's burning it down. So when you talk to somebody like Dr. Todd here, he's always thinking, why were the symptoms ever created? Why is this happening? How can we deal with that? Not to forget about the symptoms, but to get to that root cause problem, the foundation of what's going on, which is another coined term that you brought up, right? Foundational medicine, because you're looking for the why something's happening. So if you have a urinary tract infection, a SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a H. pylori overgrowth, it's not a infection of H. pylori or a SIBO infection, it's an overgrowth, right?
Correct. So the approach is going to look at that foundational way of looking at things. So taking your example a little further, I really like that example. So say the house is on fire, Western medicine is going to put a facade up there and just say, hey, we're going to mask the symptoms, the fire's still going. The functional medicine approach is like, oh, let's add more 2x4s, just put more paint on the walls, but the fire's still going. The foundational medicine approach or foundational approach is let's put the fire out and then let's rebuild the walls and put, redo the paint and remodel the house. Let's get the foundation put into play by removing the fire. The way you do that is you have to get out what's creating the problem in the first place. And it's not necessarily the fact that the smoke is the issue. It's the fire that's the issue. So let's get rid of the toxin causing the smoke, and creating the facade of what's really happening. So that's where, I look at, okay, hey, how do I get a really good, healthy microbiome? How do I, we take probiotics. That's the super popular thing for the last 20 years. And my approach has always been, if you want to get a beautiful lawn in your backyard and you move into this new house, it's full of weeds. They've never put a lawn in there. So are you just going to go out there and throw a bunch of seeds in there, expect the lawn to grow? No, you're going to go out there and you're going to clear out all the weeds. Okay. You're going to fertilize the ground, water it, and prepare it for the seeds to go in to then have a great opportunity to survive. So otherwise, they're just not going to survive, and the weeds are still going to dominate. Same thing with parasites or the candida overgrowth, the fungal overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth. You have to clear out to why that is occurring.
Now, this is a great example for people to think about, because I know when I'm talking to clients on an everyday basis, like, well, I've done all the work. I've done all the diets. I've done the keto versus carnivore versus AIP and FODMAP and vegan. Why am I not better? I've done a parasite cleanse. I've done antibiotics, IVIG. They've done it all in their mind, and they've done a lot of work, and they've been doing it for a decade, and they still can't understand, why am I not there? And as we go through their history and we start talking to them and learning about them and understanding them, so often there's something that's been missed. That's why they're still not well.
That's their environment.
The environment that they're in, whether that be mental and emotional, whether that be chemical, atrazine, uranium, mold, or even if they're doing something where they physically are damaging themselves. I've seen this too. They're eating 500 calories a day to try to maintain a body weight.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's hard.
So there's no nutrients. So then all that microbiome is fighting itself to try and get nutrients. And there's one's going to win out. There's an imbalance that's created. So as I talk with clients and they're trying to understand their body, what's missing, if they start thinking about it from a perspective of not why do I have irritable bowel syndrome, but, well, not why do I have it, but what is allowing me to have this problem? What is allowing this to stay here? Then you start actually thinking, okay, wow, is it the water I'm drinking, the food I'm eating, the way that I address problems in my life? I'll have an example of this that I love to share with people because I think it's gentle enough that it doesn't make anybody too mad. Like, have you ever met somebody that just gets really worked up when they're going to have the family over for a holiday? They've got to have their house absolutely perfect. And if it's not perfect, then they're so stressed out. Does that person usually get sick after that event?
Always.
Are they usually wore out after that event? So it doesn't have to just be chemical, although that's a little bit what we're talking about today. When it comes to foundational medicine, you are looking for the why that person isn't in optimal health from a perspective of they should be. So that's terrain theory. You should be well. Why are you not? Versus germ theory of, oh, this thing took you down. Let's just go fix that.
And it's interesting because it's different for each person. I remember doing part 1 boards when we were doing our boards, and I'm one of those over preparer type personalities, perfectionist. And with that going on, I stress out about like failing, and I shouldn't have to because I did so well anyways on my boards. I did more than sufficient to pass. But at the same time, I put a lot of pressure because I had a family, I had 3 little kids. I felt like I had a lot of pressure to be sure I passed and succeeded on this. So with that, after the we passed boards, we got through and we were all done. Man, I crashed for 2 weeks. I mean, literally just stress, everything, your body, that pressure you put on your body. And and I'm sure here's Jaban, he doesn't let anything ever bother him. He just out working out and just doing this thing, and took boards, passed boards really well, and he was fine. But it goes back to personality types and are a little different. And another thing I know for myself is if I don't get my sleep, then that shifts and changes my immune system to where I can be more susceptible to getting sick. So sleep for me is important. I can't run on 5 hours of sleep for multiple days, where a lot of other kids, granted, I was 41 when I started my doctorate program, and those other kids were 24, 25. But having gone through some of my own health issues there, and I think it just is one of those things that I needed to regenerate, and it does make an effect on your microbiome. Sleep, stress, it changes that.
So when we're talking about terrain theory and foundational medicine, we're talking about right now the way that your body operates and how it can either be healthy or unhealthy. What are some other things that are seeping into people's lives that they probably aren't thinking about?
Well, I think some of it really, especially people that have been sick for a long time, it could go back to just some of their experiences in their first 5 years of life. Either in utero, when the mom was carrying the baby, or in their first 5 years. I read a book by Dr. Gabe Roberts, who we both know.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about PTSD and trauma and how it affects people's health. But that initial trauma from the first 5 years of life could then affect you later on in life on how your body perceives in it, how it goes through stress and trauma. So secondary events can then later on can make a shift, and all of a sudden, boom, you crash. That was something that I've found has been pretty profound on helping some of my more difficult patients, going back further into their lives and working through some of those emotional events or trauma that they have gone through. Some basic day-to-day things for me is exercise. So movement is life. I tell my patients, movement is life. Actually moving your body, exercising changes your physiology and changes your microbiome. and then you create more ATP and more energy. You upregulate your hormones in a more positive manner, which then changes your physiology to be able to overcome some of these other stressors that occur. So, can people healthy, really healthy, get sick? And sure, absolutely. But you can see for the most part, people that are out in the sun, that are working out and moving, that are cognizant of what they're eating, the kind of water they're drinking, and then the environment that they put themselves in at work or who they're around, can, really change the expression. We talk about gene expression.
Mm-hmm.
These environmental things that I just mentioned can change our genetic expressions, can cause epigenetic expression changes, can, change the microbiome within your body.
We're always looking for that lab test to understand the whys. And when people are sitting there looking at their labs, they're so frustrated because their doctor said everything looks good. And I've even looked at labs and then, oh, your general blood looks great. Like there's nothing here.
Right.
Which I joke with them. I go, well, it means you're probably not going to die anytime soon, at least of, what they call natural causes. Doesn't mean you don't have symptoms. Because just because your CBC and your CMP look nice doesn't mean you feel well. What you're saying is your mindset, your past traumas, your stress load can change the way that your genes, we all thought genes for a long time were just set and that's the way you are. You have blue eyes and brown hair and all genes were that way. It just stays. But what we found, epigenetics that you mentioned, they're calling more soft genes. And there's tens of thousands of them.
Yeah.
Even though if you go out on social media, people are saying, oh, you need to know these 7. Or you need to know these 10 or 30 or, 23 was a popular number there for a while with one of the tests. They've had tests for more than 1,000. And what we're finding is whether it's the atrazine in your water, the stress in your life, those things trigger changes in your genes that change the way that you express ability to absorb B12 or the ability to absorb vitamin D or glutathione, which changes the way you detox, clear out toxins. So the more stress your body's under, the more your genes change, which can make you even more vulnerable because they can no longer keep up with your day-to-day chemical, physical, emotional stressors. What do you do about it?
That's a good question, Brian. So it depends on the approach you make on this. I think that's where a lot of the things we talked about earlier is where the benefits can occur. So that's where your mindset needs to change, your environment needs to change. You need to see what in those things are creating a disruption. If there's parasites and clear parasites, if there's toxins, clear toxins. Make sure you're not consuming the toxins on a daily basis, which is super important. That's why I drink distilled water and I just add electrolytes back in.
Let me stop you there. There is a lot of controversy around distilled water.
There is.
Can you explain what distillation the process is and why you would drink distilled water over reverse osmosis or carbon or something else filtering?
So distilled water takes, there's a machine that takes water and then takes it and converts it, heats it up to a gas state. It goes over, it gets cooled down, and then converts back into water. So from my research, that it's by far the best way to keep clean water. If you think about every machine you use, whether it's a CPAP or any medical device, what do they say to use? RO water?
No.
Nope. A murky filter or some other filtered water? Nope. Only clean water, because I know this because I've tested it on different machines, is distilled water. So I drink distilled water and they're like, oh, that's dead water. Nature's way of creating rain is a distillation process. And so when you really look at it, is I have water, then I can always add in other elements that can energize the water and also provide the electrolytes that are what our cells need. But the first and foremost thing I'm trying to do is get the chemicals out that are causing the disruption in all these processes in the body. And glyphosate alone, well, talking to a doctor that was the foremost expert in it, studied it since 1975. It's a friend of mine. He said it inhibits 291 enzymatic reactions in the body and cells.
Wow.
So what it does is it comes in and binds onto these enzymes and neutralizes the enzymes from functioning, and then creates all kinds of other problems. I'm sure atrazine does a similar type of thing. So what's better, to have water that is, has other chemicals in it, or distilled water that is clean and natural? And that's why I've gone down that road. The water that comes in, the bottles at the store, it says purified water. What does that really mean?
Nothing. Just like all natural means nothing.
Exactly. So you can't really trust a lot of that stuff. And then, if you look at the earth, even, I have well water. Water's coming up through the ground, through the natural processes. It still has metals. Our ground is full of metals. They're elements, they're minerals. And so radium is in a lot of the waters, and different elements can be in there. Depends how much they then purify that water, or there's ways of taking out some of the metals, like some of the reverse osmosis processes can help remove some of those minerals too.
I hear the same thing you're talking about, dead water. You removed all the minerals from the water as reasons not to drink distilled water. And one of the things that I've said back to people, I go, are you saying that tap water has healthy minerals in it that you're wanting to drink? Because we've tested those waters before. They're on EPA's website, and tap water doesn't have all the appropriate minerals that the human body would require to survive. So if distilled water has no minerals and is going to be problematic, and we know tap water doesn't have them either, then the entire world should at this point be mineral deficient.
Well, and you look at what's bioavailable in your minerals.
Mm-hmm.
So, for us, you look at the water and it sprays up on our windows, and what happens? It leaves hard water deposits.
Mm-hmm.
How's our body absorbing hard water deposits for these minerals in that form? So it's an inorganic form. The organic form of minerals is much healthier. Where do we find those? In our foods. Fruits, vegetables, meat. We can find the inorganic forms that our body needs to be able to survive. So adding in inorganic minerals doesn't necessarily mean it's the answer, especially from a tap water source or something to that nature.
Yeah, because doesn't it show in studies that when companies tried to fortify foods by adding minerals, that the absorption was so abysmal that it wasn't really worth doing it? So adding fortified water, meaning putting tiny rocks or inorganic forms of minerals into water, would be also nearly useless. Are there ways to put a mineral back into water that is an organic format, such as something you're an expert in, fulvic humic or otherwise?
Yeah, so the fulvic humic, it gives you the trace minerals. It may not be enough electrolytes your body may need for your cells, but it gives you the trace minerals that are in plants that have been broken down and then in a bioavailable form. They're bound to carbon, and your body knows how to process that and utilize it. And that's where there's been so many studies in regards to fulvic humic acids and so many health conditions that you can go look up on PubMed. But then, not all fulvic humics are alike. And so then you do a lot of research, which I've spent a lot of time in researching what are the best, I look at different markers to see what those are. They all have a different, depends where you mine it from, the types of minerals that are in them. And then also the pH of the soils, the extraction processes and methods that you use to get it out of the soil and stuff. So there's multiple things that people need to understand, and you don't just go right out and buy one, because there's been companies that have had them out there before they've been shut down because they had such high amounts of lead in it. But the it just goes back to is where is that coming from? Where's the mine? And then the processes of cleaning and extracting it, and then consuming it, and then what's the pH, what's the validity of how well does that break down that solution. So some of them really just go disseminate into the water, amazing, and others don't, more hydrophilic. So they have a hydrophilic and hydrophobic, meaning a fat or water soluble components to it. And some of those that really assimilate well in the body have that hydrophilic or water soluble component to it.
So you would want to, if you bought a fulvic-humic electrolyte would be the right word, trace mineral, a fulvic-humic that you're putting back into your distilled water, you'd want to see it disseminate out, not just drop to the bottom.
Right. And then depending on the person, it may not be enough of those nutrients, but that's where food, not processed food, but real food, is so important.
So on the distilled topic, you drink distilled water. I also drink distilled water. And there was a mutual friend of ours that had a daughter that kept having stomach aches, right?
Yes.
Is that a little bit where this came from? I want you to give the example so that people can understand, even when you're doing everything right, if your water is not, it can be a massive hindrance.
Yeah. So one of my colleagues moved to the Caribbean, there, Puerto Rico area, and they supposed to have really good, great water. And his daughter started having tummy aches. He started having some redness in his skin. His wife was having some issues. All three of them were. And with that, he came come and see me, and I was like, man, there's something going on. It's in your water. Like, oh, you told me that 6 months ago. I'm like, well, did you change it? And he's like, no. He was using a Berkey filter, and then he was doing the vortexing and everything on his water. I didn't change it. So then I said, you need to maybe get cleaner water. And that's where we looked into the distilled water, and all of a sudden, literally, boom, the problems went away. Tummy ache went away within a week. And they both cleared up with their symptoms. His wife had an ear congestion for over a year and a half. And they thought she just had an infection, had done all different things. And their neighbor was an urgent care doctor, owned a bunch of clinics, even tried antibiotics, which they would never normally do. And nothing worked. And then when they stopped drinking the water, about a month later, it was gone. So there's a chemical that they realized that the way they get rid of trash and everything, they didn't line those type of places properly. So there's leaching into the water supply.
So even quality filters that are not distilled are not typically good enough. What I'm seeing, and why I wanted you to really go into this, was a lot of filters claim they remove things.
Correct.
And then I go back and test. I go back and run labs. We look at things like, for instance, uranium or radium, and hair testing on people with giant reverse osmosis systems in their homes, or other amazing expensive filters. And it's just not getting the job done. It's just not removing everything. So as you said, if you're going to drink water, it has to start clean. It has to actually start truly clean. And then whatever you want to do to it, whether it's remineralize it or structure it or hydrogen water it, you take clean water and you do that to it. But you got to be clean first.
Yes. And an example I had is I was one of the little ice makers and make the pebble ice. And you have to clean it every so often. And even using those filtration systems, there'd be like black stuff in there, and I had to clean things out. And once I started using the distiller, I had to clean it way less, and it made the life of the machine go so much longer. So that's why they only allow, the medical devices to use distilled water, because of the other stuff that's in it.
I can tell you, if you ever get a distiller, once you've had to clean it one time, you'll never go back. That's it. I mean, in my clinic, we forgot to clean it for like 4 weeks. And we've got like the middle-sized one that holds about 5 extra gallons. And we didn't do it for a month. And there was a half inch of sewer smelling junk that we had to clean off the entire like entry point of the water where it does its evaporation portion. So it leaves all the components there. There's like a half inch of filament all the way around that. Like we soaked it so many different times, it was chipping off. And we had a bucket of it that we took pictures of for our social media post.
Wow. That's why I like the mega one, the big one, because then it does self-cleaning and then you can go through and you don't have to clean it as often.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's amazing what's in the water supply. Maybe Kansas City is worse than other cities.
I don't know either, but like I said, once you do it one time, that's it. You're done with drinking tap water ever again. It's over.
So I had a patient, he was an engineer, a water engineer down in worked in Salt Lake City. And he had, I think, 4 different filters for his water. And I lived in Meridian in Boise, near Boise. And he would come up and inspect their stuff and make sure everything was up to par. And so he did this for the municipalities. And he says, man, I would never drink municipality water. He was so, that's what really opened my eye up to, wow, this guy's saying, what he knows about water in the municipalities is like, man, I better really pay attention to that. Now, where I live, in our house we built and stuff that I get, it's well water. So I don't necessarily get the deeper toxins from a municipality water, but even well water, this stuff can get into the aquifers. I just don't think it's maybe as contaminated as what the municipality water.
Well, you say municipality water, we're talking about things that have been tested that they found. Prescription medication,
Sure,
drugs, all the farming chemicals, road chemicals, and any and everything else that is sprayed that you don't want near your body is there. So wrapping this back into terrain theory, just talking about water now, we all drink it. We all shower in it. We all have to have water to survive. And if you think back 100 years ago, before most of these chemicals were ever developed, we can go back before the Industrial Revolution, where we were mining and getting all of this metal out of the ground that's not supposed to be in our water supply, in our body, elemental metals and chemicals, uraniums and radiums, bringing it to the surface, putting it around us. And now it's in our water supply. It's tested, it's proven, there's no question about it. Just that alone, that change, how does that affect your body, your terrain, your microbiome? That those bacteria have never been around this stuff either, because they've been living in humans for however long. And now they're being impacted. How's that changing them? And it starts to give you a real window into the steps that it may take, such as distilling water, to create an environment for our bodies to do most optimal. Well, Todd, this has been an amazing talk. You are the doctor's doctor, the biochemistry guy. I'll never forget our entire class all trying to go and learn from you for biochem, and just, how you basically got a perfect score on the biochem test. So when we're talking about this chemistry stuff, this guy knows a little bit about it.
A little bit. It's fun. I enjoy it.
But thank you so much for coming and talking with me today. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me with you.
And that's a wrap. I'll run and grab a key. I'll come right back with the key in a microphone. Appreciate it.